Welcome to Data Forward, the podcast that keeps you ahead in the fast-evolving world of enterprise AI and data management. We bring you expert insights, actionable strategies, and the latest trends to help you stay on top. Ready to shape the future of data? Let's Data Forward.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Data Forward. I'm joined today by Ashwin Rajeeva, the CTO of Acceldata. Hey, Ashwin.
Hi, Amy. Happy to be here.
Thanks for joining me today. So I want to start off by talking a little bit about sort of the future of the data management space. I'd love to hear from you sort of what's different from when you started in this space and how you define sort of next generation data management architecture.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think to understand the future of data architectures, first you must understand where we come from, right? So let me give you an example of what was the state of the art maybe 10 to 15 years back. Most of the time, enterprises were essentially looking at collecting data over these transactional systems, moving them over to decision support systems. And that was more or less it. There was a lot less data which was being accessed or being used. And there was not much of a need for real-time systems or real-time decision making. And of course, there was no real need for something like AI, which is a trend we see in the last couple of years. Moving forward, I think enterprises will need to adopt different architectures because of few reasons. Number one is that the scale itself is different. More and more data is coming into the enterprise. There are more use cases being enabled. There is the trend of AI and ML, in which a lot of the data is not structured anymore and is not required for it to be structured. And the fourth is more and more the rise of cloud as the delivery mechanism. So when you look at the intersection of all of these industry-wide movements, it is almost a transformation which is required in the way companies manage, access, use data. And going forward, I think that making sure that you have a strategy for bringing in structured data at scale on hybrid architectures, such as cloud-based architectures. You might have legacy systems which you have invested in over the last 20 years, and also being ready to move to the AI future, where a lot of data needs to be unstructured, putting it all together and creating the next generation of analytics and decision support systems is going to be critical.
That's super interesting. So you talked about this a little bit, but how do you think about sort of the different use cases that would be enabled in different types of architecture? So on-prem, hybrid, cloud.
Yeah. One of the things that I think nobody can wish away is the fact that data management as a practice has been there for about 2 decades now, right? And so companies of all sorts have this huge amount of data that they've collected, and it's largely lying in their data centers and drives. And it's almost impossible for us to expect them to move it to the cloud, right? Now, on cloud allows for unlimited flexibility, immediate provisioning, but there are industries where it's not possible, purely because, compliance issues, governance issues, data sovereignty issues. It's important for companies to understand that it's going to take a long time for them to move to the cloud. And in many cases, it might not even be possible. So whatever strategy they follow essentially has to be a hybrid strategy, where the modern platforms which are being built by them live on the cloud, but a lot of data which is driving these applications might just be on-prem. So as a company and as a vendor, the responsibility is on us that we provide this flexibility, that customers should have and must have the option of running the workloads where the data is, and they should be able to use cloud-based data stores, cloud-based architectures, the same way as they would use on-prem architectures.
It's quite a challenge to create that sort of unified experience across those different layers of the stack, isn't it?
It is, because very few people understand is that most companies carry the burden of legacy, right? So when you talk to a customer, they're going to talk about how they've invested in a certain product or a certain system or decision support systems which are built over the last 10 years, but by using different technologies, multiple vendors, service integrators, and bringing that all into some sort of unified architecture is extremely difficult, both for the customer, both for the enterprises, and also for us as a vendor. When we talk to our Fortune 500 customers, a lot of times they also want to incorporate their hybrid strategy, and we must allow the flexibility for them to do it.
Yeah. So that leads sort of perfectly into the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is sort of the data observability landscape. Why is data observability not just another tool? And how does it help sort of provide that single pane of glass?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think to really understand data observability, we should also think about observability as a concept, and largely as applied to applications and microservices and things like that. And what ends up happening is that as you observe the application stack getting diverse, more open source, more complex, cloud-based, there is a need for observability providers to come in and put a sense around a company's application landscape. That's what companies like Datadog and New Relic are into.
Mm-hmm.
You use that as an enterprise software where it tells you exactly what's going on in my application layer.
Right.
Now, data applications, were not so diverse, say 10 years back, right? You used to have maybe a few databases, RDBMS, OLTP systems, and maybe a couple of decision support systems. But if you talk to any enterprise today, they're going to tell you that they use hundreds of data sources and a variety of decision support systems, analytics, machine learning, and now AI. And there is a need for observability to be applied at the data level as well. And that's what Acceldata does as a company. That's what our hypothesis is, that as the data landscape gets more and more complicated, more and more complex, it's not possible for most enterprises to have like a buffet of different tools and then have each one perform a different function, but not really talk to each other. And Acceldata in data observability really believes that you need to have an enterprise dashboard for your data, right? You need a single pane of glass. You need one shop where everybody who's involved in your data pipeline, in your data landscape, can go and look at what's going on and get a handle on issues that occur, anomalies that happen, quality of data, reliability of data, cost management, data pipeline monitoring, all in one place. So as you add more complexity, as you add more workflows, you can essentially get an idea of what's really going on at the system level.
I'd love to ask you there's a lot of technical challenges that you could be devoting your time to. What do you think is so interesting about this space that it's what you want to work on every day?
Yeah, I think I love that, my background is in data. I've been in this, in big data and in the data engineering field for close to a decade now. And what excites me most is that it's data as a technology and as a field to work in evolves very quickly. So in the last 10 years, we've seen the rise of Databricks, we've seen the rise of Snowflake, we've seen the dawn of AI. And you cannot really get the same velocity and the same value for your work in many other fields where things don't change as often, right? And it has an outsized impact. So, for example, some of our customers tell us that the work that you did has actually meaningfully impacted the lives of their customers, right? So if a bank can serve its customers better, that's good for everyone. And that really keeps me going.
Okay, so I can't have you on this podcast and not talk about AI. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit towards AI integration. How you've mentioned sort of the cloud deployment as part of the necessary architecture for AI use cases in the enterprise. How do you think about what else is necessary in this sort of new AI world that we're living in?
At the core of it, I'm a big believer in the whole AI wave. And, as a practitioner, I've been working on technology for close to now 19 years. And I've seen trends emerge. Some of them, tend to not live up to the hype. And I feel that this AI wave is slightly different because the number one thing which it enables is for people to work at a higher productivity level. That is true for content creators who now can write content at a speed which was not possible before. It's true for programmers who can now, uh, you know, get all their boilerplate done in minutes. And it's true for people and knowledge workers generally worldwide, where they can actually use this as a tool to 10x their productivity. So, at sense, if you look at a typical organization or where people are spending an enormous amount of time doing work which could be easily automated using AI. And from a data perspective, you can think of it as in two ways. Number one is the obvious productivity boost that you get, right? You don't need so many people to do a lot of this boilerplate sort of work. Think of, off the shelf transformations of data, moving data, parsing data. A lot of it can be done by AI, and you don't even need to kind of pre-process it because a lot of AI, what it's really good at is extracting meaning out of unstructured data. And the second bit, I think, which is a lot more transformative, is that historically business applications, the applications which is used in banks and insurance companies and healthcare companies day to day, is exhausting. It creates more work than it solves. To do something simple, you have to click a lot of buttons, move a lot of forms, and have a lot of process overhead. And what something like AI does there is that it enables people to describe their intent and get their work done. And so as more and more people get used to AI in their daily lives, on their phones, on their devices, on their desktops, I think user behavior changes from business software as well, where on one aspect they see how transformative AI can be, where they can just get all the work done by typing it in English, and when they reach the office, right, they have to do all this laborious work of clicking forms and pressing buttons and waiting for process. So business software needs to change, and business software is the only measurable, meaningful change which can come in the future is through adoption of AI, where software in general understands your intent instead of making you do a lot of work, which essentially kills productivity through the chain.
And how would you describe the sort of delta between where enterprises are right now with their data architecture and their capabilities and where they need to be to deliver on the promise of AI for their customers and for their employees?
Yeah. I think a lot of growth is going to come in very specific domains, right? So any general technology like AI, it's hard to adopt it into different fields. So let's take banking for an example. Now, if you say, hey, how do I transform day-to-day banking or banking operations through AI? The first thing you would think of is the consumption side of it. Maybe smarter agents, maybe better chatbots, maybe better, agents on the call. And so you can scale it without having to scale the number of people who handle, let's say, phone banking, right? But it's much harder to imagine the transformation on the enterprise side, on the back office side. And that's because a lot of times the process is not purely technical. It's a people plus process problem. And a lot of time and effort has been put together in setting up certain processes which drive the enterprise, right? Now, for an AI to come in and essentially replicate all of this complexity, it's hard because there's a need for accuracy in the system, right? You can't have a system which works 60% of the time, 70% of the time. You can't run a business that way. And so I feel that a lot of enterprises are trying to now figure out where, especially in the back office, where some of these technologies can be applied effectively and accurately. In some places, it makes a lot of sense. For example, in law, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because a lot of it is just documents.
Black and white.
Yeah, it's very black and white. But in process-driven systems, I think there's the need for accuracy drives the fact that, hey, we need the systems to be more reliable. And I think efforts are on across the industry, maybe with agentic AI, maybe with more accurate function calling, where the agents might get to a place in the near future where they can kind of, work at the back end as well as they work on the front end.
And if we talk about unstructured data and LLMs for a second, um, first of all, do you think structured data will eventually be a thing of the past, or do you think we'll always have some element of structured data?
I don't think it'll be a thing of the past, purely because unstructured data, though, would probably be the majority because the systems get so good at deriving meaning, you don't really need to structure the data. A lot of our world depends on the ability to do things in a certain way, or in more technical terms, in a certain transactional way. And those things are not going to change because it requires an enormous amount of change delivered worldwide through systems that we take for granted, right? For example, credit card processing, cross-border
Payments.
payments and foreign exchange. And it would be hard for us to imagine a future right now sitting here where all of this is transformed by AI and all you need to do is to say something and the entire system just is smart enough to execute what you know. So I think it'll be a hybrid world for some time in the future. And enterprises need to figure out how do you bring these two worlds together coherently, right? And have a strategy which addresses both of these problems.
And what strategies do you think enterprises should adopt to manage and derive value from unstructured data?
I think the most obvious patterns at this moment which have emerged are to do with information retrieval, right? So let me give you a simple example. One of the things an LLM is best as is something what perplexity does, right? So you ask a question and it can figure out from different sources with some technology applied on how to get these data sources, and then provide you with an answer in natural language, which best matches what you need. Now compare this to, online search a few years back, right? What you had to do was to make the decision about what is the right answer yourself. And that's the same for programming. You had to go through 10 different Stack Overflow answers and then figure out which one of them is most accurate to what you want to do. So the first thing I think where we see adoption is a change in information retrieval in industries where there's a lot of unstructured information. For example, healthcare imaging, clinical diagnosis, patents and IP, law. And I think adoption would be a little bit more difficult, like I said earlier, where there is a need for more structured and accuracy. Because the tolerances for failures or for hallucinations are very, very less, and so we need to wait for that future to arrive.
So if you look forward to the future, how do you think that enterprises can prepare for sort of next gen architectures today?
That's a great question. I think the first step is to accept that the future is coming, right? And start working towards, on three aspects. Any successful project or product that you want to develop would have a technical aspect to it, and there's a people aspect to it. And I think, getting your people an appreciation for the speed at which the technology is changing and the need to upskill and adapt is critical. And those who don't do it will essentially be left behind, where you're not able to see the future and your people are not able to see the future. So when the future arrives, you're not ready. That has happened many, many times in the industry, and it's going to happen at a large scale when these models become good enough for, let's say, the 80% use case. So I think an easy first step is to upskill your people, make sure that they know how to work with these models, or in the new way of working, right? Use these models to basically up-level their productivity. And on a more technical aspect, I think this will lead to an explosion of data coming in. And so teams need to move really quickly to build and scale their architectures that they can take advantage of it. Some of it has to do with, things like procuring enough hardware, procuring enough horsepower to run these models, run these use cases. And some of it has to do with the governance around these models, which has to do with things like traceability of the responses, right? Or ethical responses, or how do you manage biases in some of these models? I feel that if there is an appreciation for these challenges which are going to come in the near future, then you can get your workforce and your people ready to take on these challenges. I think that's the most critical. And of course, the technical part of it follows, that you need to move fast.
Do you think that data quality is going to become even more of an issue when we're in an AI sort of first world?
Yeah, it will be, but not the way in which most people think, right? Data quality, in some sense, when we talk about it and when our customers talk about it, is largely seen from the lens of a rule, whether a column in a database matches a rule or not, right? But if you look at it from an AI lens, it's similar but not the same, right? What you're trying to figure out is whether a response to a certain query is accurate or not. And accurate has many meanings. You could be an exact match for some piece of data, whether you get it out the same or not, or maybe the response is accurate or not. So it's much easier in the transactional world, where you want to say, if I put in $20 on this system, do I get the value 20 on the other side? But if you're looking at a response generated by an AI system, how do you define accuracy? And so I think there's a new definition of accuracy, which is a little bit more advanced and a little bit more nuanced than what is when you think about data quality. And the definition of data quality itself needs to change for the AI world. So yes and no, data quality is important, but not in the way that most people imagine it being.
That's super interesting. Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Data Forward podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest insider news, be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.